That's right, yeah, got an agenda.
Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again, barefaced lies. Too often, I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Hey Sean, you got a party, got that little party going on there. Keep to the left, you can't think right, so everything you do goes wrong, yeah. Incompetence just leads to disaster. Corruption brings it on even faster. What you say?
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Comrades, you always told us you'd build us all a new Jerusalem, yeah. You talk the talk, but when you walk, you only leave a crooked line there. And you don't see the trouble that's brewing if all you do is just what you're doing.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Is this where you wanna be? Dancing childhood poverty. Will somebody set us free from this corrupt kleptocracy? Oh yeah.
Barefaced lies.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you really wanna where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very good afternoon. My name is Raj Amir. This is the second part of my analysis of the Oldham Council meeting from last week. That's the September Council meeting. The first part of my analysis, we spent a couple of hours, and from that we extrapolated some key highlights. The first highlight I think it is important to draw to your attention, to remind people who haven't watched the first transmission, is that Arooj Shah, leader of Oldham Council, that's the Muslim leader of Oldham Council. She herself identified, promotes herself as a Muslim, so I think it's important for us to endorse her that way. The self-identified Pakistani Muslim councillor of Oldham Council confirmed that she is handing over the Tommyfield site, that's the historic outdoor market site, her Tommyfield site, to Star Academies. Star Academies, for those of you who don't know, specialise in Muslim faith schools. So that's a confirmation that Arooj Shah, leader of Oldham Council, is handing over land, Tommyfield, the historic Tommyfield market site, to an academy trust, a private business that specialises in Muslim faith schools. And if that causes you concern, what should really cause you concern more than that, in my opinion, is that the fact that the chief executive of Oldham Council, Harry Caffrell, sits on the board. So there's a clear conflict of interest, and documents released to me from inside Oldham Council, from sources from within Oldham Council, confirmed that the Tommyfield site is valued at an astronomical £33 million. So it seems as though Arooj Shah is handing over, if not all of it, then part of a site that's valued at over £33 million to an organisation that specialises in Muslim faith schools. The second part of the key highlights to pull out of what we went through on Sunday night, I think, is how the questions, the opposition leaders' questions, have now been removed from the full council meeting. It's another small step towards tyranny, and it was introduced by Arooj Shah last September, but she made it last year. I'm not quite sure if there's like a period in time where that has to be challenged, and that was 12 months. She waited until now to enforce it, whereby councillors, leaders of the opposition, for instance Howard Sykes stood up, Graham Sheldon stood up, other leaders of opposition parties were unable to stand up to ask the leader of Oldham Council questions. Long-standing tradition that the opposition party leaders can stand up and ask questions of the leader, and that seems to have been taken away by Arooj Shah. Another small step towards tyranny, and it was done without the real knowledge. It was done without the opposition councillors understanding the ramifications of what took place. We also saw on the top tier a new reverend, a new canon, come and do his prayers. It was very, very interesting, very politically motivated, I think, and worrying about what happened there. And Alexander Bogatov now sits on the top table. It seems that Alexander Bogatov is going to become the new borough solicitor. Remember, Paul Entwistle is retiring, he's running away, he's had enough. And Alexander Bogatov. Now, Alexander Bogatov is the bald chap who looks like an extra out of a James Bond spoof movie. And he's the one who tried and failed to take an injunction out against me to silence me from doing exactly what I'm doing now. That's Alexander Bogatov, has been rewarded by Arooj Shah. Also, you will have noticed, if you go to the council meetings, you'll have noticed the absence of Emma Barton. Emma Barton is the YTS Chief Executive. She isn't there. And it's been brought to my attention that Emma Barton has been off since somewhere, I think, in July, and not due back until October. If I didn't know any better, I think it is Shelley Kipling now, who came in from the communications team in the Labour-dominant Manchester City Council, who is looking to take on the reins of Arooj Shah's partner in crime as Chief Executive of Oldham Council. Shelley Kipling, of course, has already been exposed by Councillor Lewis Quigg for overstepping her mark as a council officer in attempting to harass and intimidate him from legitimately questioning why Dale Cregan's getaway driver, Arooj Shah's hangout guy, Irish Imi, was deployed as part of a Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council vigilante militia into Coldust to prevent fake riots that never were at risk of happening. So all of that took place last time. We'll pick up where we need to go on, and we'll see how it goes. There's only a few of you here live watching with me. Those of you who've asked me why I'm doing it live this early, I didn't want to do it at 9 o'clock at night. I've got a few things to do after this, and I didn't want to do it at 9 o'clock at night, and then by doing it at 9 o'clock at night, I don't finish until 1 in the morning, so that's why I didn't want to do it later. So people who want to catch up on it, I'm sure will catch up on it later on in the evening at the pace.
I know, follow that. Please do put your questions in. Please do put your questions in writing, and if you don't get answers from cabinet members, we can bring it to this next meeting again and ask why you didn't get a response. Strengthening the Online Safety Act. I call on Councillor Harrison to move and Councillor Nashin to second the motion.
Move, Mr. Mayor. Disinformation is not a new concept, but the internet has magnified it. According to UNESCO's survey of November 23, 56% of internet users frequently use social media to stay informed about current events. A scary statistic given the consequences that malicious actors' claims have. The Director General of the UN's culture body stated that false information and hate speech online poses major risks to social cohesion, peace and stability. Societally, disinformation does cause unrest, division and destruction. Because of disinformation and misinformation online, far-right riots took place across the country. As our new Labour Prime Minister swiftly demonstrated can be done, we must ramp up criminal justice by strengthening enforcement mechanisms to ensure compliance and increase penalties for violations. And finally, and this is a must, ensure victims of online abuse and crimes are properly supported as if it was a face-to-face crime. Please support this motion.
It is, however, worse in the case of digital media, especially on social media platforms. Ease of access and use of speed information diffusion and difficulty in correcting false information make control of undesirable information an appalling task. The widespread anti-immigrant riots in the past few weeks and the false viral claims that fuel them may be the clearest, most direct example yet of the way unchecked misinformation on social media can produce violence and harm. Police have openly blamed that misinformation for the violence across the country, with rioters throwing bricks at mosques, setting cars on fire and chanting anti-Islamic slogans whilst clashing with police officers in riot gear. Please support this motion and to strengthen the Online Safety Act in addressing the safety issues, spread of misinformation and to protect our communities. There is more that unites us than divides us. Thank you.
Essentially, there is...
Okay, so that was Harrison Umar Nassim. Harrison, of course, is a disgraceful specimen of a councillor from Chadderton South, and it is a shame that the Conservatives did not back Cal Bardsley, because they ran a mile after it was exposed that he had been a member of the BNP 20 years ago. So it's poor form of the Conservatives, and Holly Harrison, of course, is now back in the council chamber for 4 years. The Naseem woman, well, she belongs to one of the Pakistani clans, and I think we all know what I mean when I say that. Now, context of that. Naseem going on about police cars on fire. The first time I saw police cars on fire over the summer was not the far-right riots, it was the riots in Heil, and those people definitely were not far-right. So she had absolutely nothing to say then at the time, did she? Neither did Arooj Shah. The second time I saw any rioting or any form of civil disobedience in a manner that alarmed me was the criminals from Rochdale who beat up a female police officer. You will see the likes of Naseem or Holly Harrison, because of their politics, it doesn't align with them, had nothing to say in criticising them. And she used the plural mosques being attacked. The plural is completely inaccurate. Mosques were not attacked. One mosque had a demonstration of some form outside it. A wall, I think, collapsed or was pushed over or something along those lines, but it's not like how she's portraying it where people were attacked. And more so than that, what was more reflective of the society we live in was how, as a direct consequence of social media, of people seeing those horrific scenes, that hundreds of ordinary people turned up the next day and cleaned up the mosque, cleaned up stuff outside, and they were white English people in the main from the images I saw. So what this really is about is censorship, and why they are jumping up and down, why these people are jumping up and down, because they want the Online Safety Act strengthened to go even further than it already has, so people like me can be taken off air, people like me can be put in prison, people like me who dare question them, expose them, share with people what is actually taking place, and take the time to explain my narratives of people like me to become criminalised. And the Labour Party in Oldham have been at this long before these riots took place, long before these disturbances took place a couple of weeks ago. They have been desperately trying to censor and silence free speech in Oldham, particularly after we exposed their role in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of little white girls, and the way in which Pakistani councillors and their extended families, the cartels, had criminal links, and they were using their roles, exploiting their roles to secure public assets at discount rates and trade postal votes for power. They want us silenced. They indeed support censorship. Now, what you need to understand here is that this would not necessarily have got over the line, and it gets over the line. It would not get over the line if the likes of Mark Mintz, Lisa Nafsi, Brian Hoban and Neil Hindle had not supported them. So by Neil Hindle, by Mark Mintz, by Brian Hoban and Lisa Nafsi supporting Labour, what they are supporting is censorship in this town, and they want you silenced, they want me silenced. These are the very people who got elected off us risking our lives by speaking out, and they were meant to be our representatives. Well, now they want us censored and silenced, and that is Councillor Mark Mintz and Councillor Brian Hoban. A convicted fraudster and a red-nosed Nazi-wearing Zig Heiler. Let's see what Lewis had to say.
It's I'd say a double-edged sword with much of what social media is, and hence why we've added to the motion rather than taking anything out, because there is important aspects to the motion that are in there, but equally we do have to be careful before we throw the baby out of the bathwater when it comes to free speech and people's liberties. Because too often, while social media may produce the worst in people, there is important democratic aspects to it, which allow people to, obviously in places like Venezuela, protest and display that there is mass voting irregularities, to the recent issues in Bangladesh, to other issues in countries in Europe. But equally, we have to be aware that whilst we all want to have a civilised debate, there is a place for debate that shouldn't be silenced. And too often, politicians who may not like what people have to say online want to silence that, and I think that that's wrong.
The amendment itself removes very little, if anything, at all from the motion, and instead supports, expands and adds context to most of the points that it makes and resolutions that it aims to achieve, by asking Council to undertake to acknowledge and support principles that bind our democratic and civil society, and reaffirm that both His Majesty's Government and this Metropolitan Borough Council will value and protect freedom of speech and hard-won rights and freedoms. That this Metropolitan Borough Council will never abuse the powers it has been granted against residents that are lawfully exercising their right to free speech. And that the police service in this country are the sole agency that upholds the rule of law and order. And then we have a police service that polices by consent and does so without fear or favour.
I'm going to now talk about why I don't think...
So that was the amendment from the Conservatives, essentially wanting to put some safeguards in. Okay, you want it strengthened, fine, go away and have it strengthened if the government wants to grant you that. But what we want is some guarantees that Oldham Council will never abuse its power. One, simple as that. Will never abuse its power to try and censor and silence legitimate criticism. Just residents speaking out. And secondly, if any wrongdoing has taken place, it's for the police to decide, acting without fear or favour, and not for us to deploy militias onto the street, vigilante street patrols onto the street, send round some Pakistani gangsters to follow people home, that sort of stuff. No, all of that is a no-no. It's for the police to do. That is what their amendment was. And of course, Mushtaq. This is Mushtaq exposed repeatedly. Gets up to cry racism because that's what he does best.
Should, or my colleagues, or anyone should support this amendment. The amendment makes reference to a BBC investigation which found that a Pakistani national had posted an article that included a false name for the perpetrator responsible for the slaughter of 3 young girls in Southport. The point I'm making, Mr. Mayor, is that the amendment is...
So he objects to it because the amendment makes reference to a BBC article. Not some article in Nazi Weekly or Hit Flask Monthly. Not an article in How to Make Close Friends with Your Neighbour's Horse. It was an article in the BBC. And because the Conservatives referenced an article in the BBC, he's shouting racism. Racist! Racist! It's all he knows. It's all these people know.
At best misleading, and if I were a cynic, I might think it was spreading misinformation. The riots were not stoked by a little-known website called Channel 3 Now. They were stoked by prominent figures like Mrs. Spofforth, Tommy Robinson, Andrew Tate, and Nigel Farage.
There is no evidence to suggest the riots were stoked by any of the names he mentioned. And the woman's name he mentions at the beginning, well, that is an ongoing criminal matter, and it shouldn't be for a councillor to stand up and make that allegation, because people of political allegiances other than the Labour Party left, when they make sort of statements like that, they are arrested by the police and prosecuted for interfering with ongoing court proceedings, obstructing justice. So either Mushtaq knows he's protected or is too dumb to understand that he shouldn't be speaking about ongoing cases as though the outcome has already been determined.
where the evidence points. I have an opinion as to why Councillor Quigg failed to highlight the role of Mrs Spofford and others in his amendment, instead blaming a Pakistani national. I won't share my opinion with you today.
Lewis, of course, did not blame a Pakistani national. Lewis made reference, or one of the reference Lewis made reference to, was a BBC news article. A BBC news article.
What I will do is show you a photo of the person who was responsible. This lady here.
No, it's not.
No.
So Aruj Shah is saying, you can hear her saying, no, it's not, after Lewis says that's against protocol, and he's waving a photograph of a woman saying who was responsible. That is interfering in the legal process. That's Aruj Shah, leader of Oldham Council, and Mushi Mushtaq, her deputy, Children's Services, interfering in an ongoing criminal matter, prejudicing a trial. That's what's just took her, and if I was part of that woman's defence, I would be using that, prejudicing a trial immediately, and that trial would and should collapse as a consequence of what's Aruj Shah. No, it's not! No, it's not! And racist, racist, Mushtaq, racist, racist. Well, I fancied her. Vimto. Racist. Ice cream. Racist. The only thing he's probably think isn't racist is his just for men hair dye. To give him that Lego look. Yeah, have a look. So these people are completely out of control. Contempt of court. Thank you. Contempt of court should be reported to the trial judge. 100% agree. Contempt of court.
That's in every newspaper article you can find.
Go on, carry on.
And against the person who Councillor Quigg decided to blame. So that's the actual perpetrator.
Councillor Quigg never blamed that.
Is the person Councillor Quigg decided to blame. I will not.
Can you see the Pakistani behind him? Can you see the two Pakistani councillors behind him, nodding and smiling, like that bald one behind him? I don't know his name. Can you see him? Nodding away, smiling. Racist, racist, racist. Of course, the truth is, this town is in the mess it's in because you allowed these people to take control. Every one of you has a role to play in allowing these people to take control, and now anytime anyone says anything, they play the race card, and look at the smug looks on their faces. And they wouldn't get away with it without white people, white councillors like that Holly Harrison and Peter Dean, because of the Labour Party allegiances. And none of this would be able to happen. None of this would be able to happen if it wasn't for Hince and Hoban. The people of Failsworth should be ashamed of themselves, as should the people of Shaw. Ashamed of themselves for allowing these people to stand on an independent platform, and then once they've got in, to get in bed with not just Labour, but Aruj Shah's brand of Labour. This Pakistani brand of Labour. This ethnic minority victim card, racist to any form of legitimate criticism brand of Labour. Shaw should be ashamed of itself, and the people of Failsworth should be embarrassed.
And I will ask you not to vote for this amendment because of its misleading content and quite possibly, in the opinion of some, its attempt to spread misinformation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And councillors need to lead by example.
Lib Dem.
So I think Councillor Arnott talks about the last bit of these amendments and about freedom of speech. We support all of that. However, there's a lot more in that amendment which I don't think we feel we can support, and therefore we will be supporting the motion, but we won't be supporting the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So we're running out of time.
Okay, so the Lib Dems get in bed with Labour. The Lib Dems are getting in bed with Labour. Now, what Harkness omits is there was nothing stopping them from putting in their own amendment to the motion. So there was elements in the way in which the Conservatives had worded their motion, amendment. There was nothing stopping the Liberal Democrats, from submitting their own amendment and focusing on the people of Oldham have a right to free speech and never should Oldham Council attack them for it. If that's the bit they agreed with, they should have created their own amendment that did that, and the fact that they didn't only leads me to one of two places. One, they changed their mind there because they got scared of being branded racist, and Arud Shah and Mushtaq's ploy worked. Or two, they were too lazy to put their own amendment in. Because across the country, the Liberal Democrats do support free speech. It's a fundamental aspect of being a Liberal Democrat. I suspect it was the fear of being branded racist that made these white Liberals in the Liberal Democrats run a mile. Ooh, we don't want to be called racist. Ooh, we can't be having that. Do you see how there's nothing from Hints and Hobin? Hoping no one notices them? Quietly voted with Shah to attack the people of Oldham, to attack the people of Failsworth, to silence and censor the people of Shaw. If these people had their way, we would never have been able to criticise Sean Fielding, we would never have been able to attack Arud Shah in Chadderton South or Amanda Chadderton in Royton. We would never have been able to decimate the Labour Party numbers from 47 to 27. And now Hobin and Hints are part of this. The censoring and silencing of citizens. Aided by the Yellow Belly, Lib Dems, and of course the sectarian Oldham group. Because they can't be out racist, can they? If Arud Shah's lot is crying victims, they've got to cry even more.
So Hobin, very briefly. Sorry, on the motion you want. In that case, I'm going to move to
Hobin
the
don't want to talk. Hobin don't want to
So,
talk.
Councillor Harrison, do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
He gets juicy now.
Criticism, I think we all accept that. However, I had a friend who felt during the height of the summer holidays, because of the online rhetoric, that they couldn't take their children to the park.
Thank you very much. A lot of what we've just heard isn't actually referring to the amendment, and as Councillor Arnott quite rightly said, you're referring to the resolution points, not what's necessarily in the preamble. But if we're going to go down that route, we might as well do that, because let me just be frank, Councillor Mushtaq, that was from the BBC website. In fact, the wording was from the BBC website, so perhaps the BBC are spreading misinformation, because the Channel 3 website was the one that was being quoted, and you can hold up as many props as you want, but when there's an ongoing court case, you do really need to be careful within the bounds of the law what you're doing, because otherwise you may prejudice the trial that's ongoing, or potentially going to be ongoing. So, smart move from yourself on that one. Let's talk about, shall we, Oldham's contribution to this, because it is rather interesting, to say the least, of the word community ambassadors was bounded around by the Assistant Chief Executive of this council. Something that the Assistant Chief Executive might want to be careful of, and who established these people as community ambassadors, volunteers. Well, it's interesting. Some of these volunteers have got criminal records as long as your arm. Who vetted them? Who allowed these people to police our streets with criminal records? Because I certainly didn't consent to that. And I don't appreciate having these people managing protests or policing our streets, because that's what the constabulary is for. GMP officers police our streets. And it's disturbing to say the least, that officers are being replaced by these community ambassadors. Who elected them? Who appointed them? Who put them in place? Who gave them the council high-vis jackets? Because I certainly didn't consent to that. I didn't consent to that, and the law doesn't consent to that. And I find it interesting that this council certainly seems to be going down a very dark and dangerous road, especially when the Assistant Chief Executive tries to influence the outcome of Facebook posts put on by opposition parties who may have serious questions relating to that, and that is certainly an influence of how the dark hand of this council and the officer party seems very intent on interfering in the democratic process. But then again, why should we care about that? Well, I'll tell you why we should care about that. Because free speech is something that should be valued. Because in places like Russia, you can get locked away for saying things that aren't very nice about Mr. Putin. You can get locked away for saying things about people in Brazil if you're not complimentary about the judge or the president or anyone else in the Brazilian cabinet. Get locked away for saying things that may be critical. I suppose Councillor Shah may well be bordering on that herself, given her adverse attitude towards any critique or criticism or scrutiny. So,
you will have to wrap up quickly. We've got only 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I will finish. It's interesting that this council doesn't support or protect or want to support its residents in their right to free speech. And that, to me, sets the tone. Residents of this borough should understand that this council doesn't necessarily care
Mr.
what
Mayor,
they have
point
to
of
say.
order. That's just simply not true. That statement is simply not true. And he's got no evidence. He's just saying things that don't make sense.
Just 1 second, let me just ask you, do you want to qualify your statement?
Yeah, I will, because I'll qualify the statement that you don't support our amendment. There you go.
So by not supporting the amendment, we don't support our residents.
So we're not having two ways.
Mushtaq is one of those want to be clever, but really when it comes to it, dumb Glodic boys. I think he's from Glodic. Yeah, bro. Some extra hot sauce on my kebab, please, bro. Can I have a chicken burger and do I get a discount with some, with some cash and some Rizzler paper, bro? He comes across as that. The amendment was very clear. The amendment said the council should not abuse their power. So by them not voting for the amendment and then going on about racism, when there was no racism done, unless you want to accuse the BBC of being racist, and that's a different matter entirely, Councillor Mushtaq. And Lewis just ran rings round them. Yeah. And Dr. Chowan is out of order yet again, because what Dr. Chowan is doing is increasingly putting pressure on Lewis and the other Conservatives in particular for daring to speak out, because he's been pressured himself by Arud Shah. And his bias is increasingly coming more and more apparent, in my opinion. So you quantify it, you evidence it. By the way, Mushtaq had no evidence of any of his claims. But you evidence it by what was written in the amendment. And what was written in the amendment was protect citizens' right to protest. Suggest the right of Oldham people to speak out against the council as long as it's within the law, and never abuse your power. And Mushtaq and his team, growing number of Pakistani councillors in that chamber, as you've seen, between them and the sectarian Oldham group, a growing number, and it does worry me. Nothing to do with me being against Pakistanis whatsoever. It worries me as to the type of Pakistanis that are in this council chamber, more and more. But these are the men, these are the types of people that Brian Hoban and Mark Hince and Lisa Navesey are sharing a bed with. So before any of you start blaming ethnics, I suggest you take a good look at the white councillors in Shaw and the white councillors in Failsworth, because they are the ones who are responsible for allowing this to happen, as they sit silently there. And the council passes a motion wanting people like you and people like me not just silenced, but taken away in the night to be imprisoned. What, Mushtaq? Without trial? Is that where we're going?
Sorry, we're not having two-way
I'm quite happy
debate.
to say that.
You're not having two-way debate, so would you please mind wrapping
Who am I
it
having a
up? So
debate with? Am I having a debate with you? Am I having a debate with who else? I'm quite happy to.
Honestly, when the time comes, I will happily debate with you, but
Happy days,
not
Mr.
today.
Mayor.
Not today.
Happy days. Well, Mr. Mayor, given that you want to censor the opposition, I'll close it on that motion.
No.
And
If you were censored, you would have been set down by now.
I'll move it to the vote. I'll move it to the vote, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just think the fact that someone in this chamber feels that they can take the moral high ground on this subject when they themselves have been asked by GMP to remove their online misinformation is shameful.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, that is factually untrue. So you retract that statement immediately, otherwise you'll be hearing from me and my solicitor.
And once again, truthfully, our collective efforts, all members of society working together for a common cause, should be commended. It is through working together as a community that we avoided what could have, as we saw across the country, been a horrific outcome for the residents of Oldham.
Okay, so
Thank you.
let's go back to that. So do you want to withdraw?
Okay, so Holly Harrison gets up, and there's no ambiguity there. She's making reference to Lewis, because it follows on from what Lewis is saying, and she's making reference to Lewis and claiming that Greater Manchester Police have been deployed to censor and silence a Conservative councillor. So that's what Holly Harrison from South Chadderton is doing. She's standing up and boasting that Greater Manchester Police has been deployed to censor and silence an opposition councillor, and that's how powerful they are. Of course, Lewis is right to be outraged. And that snippet, this snippet here, I put out on YouTube yesterday. Because unfortunately, the majority of people, because the majority of you don't share my work enough, which is why we don't really post on Facebook anymore. So I put this out on YouTube yesterday. It's at 8,000 views. So 8,000 people have seen the tyranny in Oldham Council and how a Labour Party councillor stands up, smirks and claims that they have the power to inform and influence Greater Manchester Police and deploy them to censor and silence opposition councillors for daring, let's be clear for what he did, for daring to object to a militia being deployed onto the streets of Oldham that included Dale Cregan's getaway driver, cop killer's getaway driver. It's their anniversary. It's on this very day that Nicola and Fiona were massacred in cold blood by Dale Cregan. His grenades and ammunition then turned up in Glodick, not far away from where Mushtaq and his mates reside. Represent. These people are shameless. And watch how inappropriately Dr. Chauhan now behaves as the mayor. Watch this.
Statement.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Quake, you just called someone a liar. Do you want to withdraw your statement? So do you want to withdraw your statement? Okay, that's
Mr.
fine.
Mayor, what I stated was that someone in this chamber feels that they can take the moral high ground. I don't really understand why Councillor Quigg is upset.
Did you never mention anything?
Councillor Sheldon, as per our group meeting, where I was asked to ask the group leader, do you want to ask your member to withdraw the statement?
I would like to ask Councillor Harrison to explain what she said about Lewis Quigg and
I didn't say anything about Lewis Quigg. What I stated was that someone in this chamber feels they can take the moral high ground on this subject when they've been asked by GMP to remove their online misinformation is shameful. I did not want to mention council.
Okay, so we're not gonna. So you're not being named, Councillor Quigg, but you asked someone lied. So do you want to stick? Do you want to stick with your words of saying liar, or do you want to withdraw your words? I'm asking you to withdraw those words. So, Councillor Sheldon, as per your group leaders' meeting, do you want to intervene on this occasion?
At the group leaders' meeting, it was said...
Sorry, just Councillor Mishtak, let me please speak.
Everybody is having a go at interrupting, aren't they, tonight? At the group leaders' meeting, it was decided that you, as the mayor, were in charge of the meeting and you would take action. It's not up to me.
You want me to remove your member from the chamber? That's what you're essentially asking me, rather than advising.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm not going to do it, but I think you're sticking with your words of saying you called someone liar. Do you want to take your words back, Councillor Quigg? That will be wiser thing to do.
Can you clarify what part of the Constitution you're referring to here, Mr. Bursley? Because I'm slightly obscured to what we're referring to, because I've got slight concerns about what's been said and what's factually accurate.
I think you just called a member a liar, and I'm just asking you, do you want to withdraw your words?
On what basis, Mr. Mayor? On what part of the Constitution are we referring to?
Because it's a offensive word to call your colleague a liar.
Right.
I don't think you can qualify that.
So if she's not prepared to... She's saying that she isn't named...
She has not named you.
Right, okay. So will she name that person?
It's Councillor Harrison, not she. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Harrison, apologies. Will you refer to that person and name that person? Yes or no?
No, she doesn't have to.
Then I'll withdraw my words on the pain and the fact...
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
I'll add a caveat here. The caveat that on your advice, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Quigg.
Would have been much
Mr.
easier.
Mayor.
Councillor Holly Harrison works at a primary school. She's a primary school teacher. Not that I'm advocating this for any minute, but imagine what would happen if a team of campaigners, Pakistani style, you know, like they do in Yorkshire, where they scared off that primary school teacher for debating Islam or whatever it was he did. What if a team of campaigners went to that school with leaflets with Holly Harrison's voting record, including the number of times she voted to block a public inquiry into the grooming and gang rape of working class white girls, and handed them out to parents? I don't think it'd go down well. I think we would be arrested, don't you? And that two-tier system that I'm describing now, we can see in society and you can see in the council chamber. Now, if you're familiar with the council constitution and you noticed how, whilst Lewis asked the borough solicitor Paul Entwistle wasn't for saying anything. The actual constitution does not allow the mayor to remove a councillor from the meeting. And there is no ambiguity. Oh, we didn't name you, like some playground sniggering from Arud Shah, the gangster's moll, who claimed she'd suffered PTSD and the side of her face has drooped because I drew attention to her gangland associates for Greater Manchester Police to falsely arrest me. That's who these people are. There was no ambiguity in what Holly Harrison was saying. She was making direct reference to Lewis Quigg. And the mayor had no right to threaten to remove him from the meeting. And when Paul Entwistle was asked by Lewis Quigg, he noticed Paul Entwistle's silence, but that's because Paul Entwistle knew that the Constitution did not allow Dr. Chowan to do what he was suggesting he was going to do. Not even suggesting. He was threatening to do what he was going to do. This is tyranny. This is exactly what tyranny is. When the people who we elect to fight for us have this done to them. Ooh, I can't vote Conservative. My granddad would turn in his grave. You stupid fucks. Every one of you who comes up with that deserves a slap. Because if your grandfather knew what was happening, he'd crawl out of his grave and slap you silly. Because this is not the Labour Party of your grandfather's time.
Can I just ask a question about this? Because she accused somebody in the chamber of being contacted by Greater Manchester Police. How can she accuse somebody in this... Excuse me, Mr Mayor. How can she accuse a member of this council... Mr Mayor...
I'm asking you to stay quiet.
I have a point of personal explanation then, Mr Mayor. No, she accused...
You're not involved in that. There's no point of personal explanation. I'm asking you to sit down now. I'm asking you to sit down second.
Hold on. Dr. C. How can he say he's not involved in this when she, yes, Holly Harrison, who, by the way, is the chair of the Standards Committee, that's how bent this town is. She's the chair, so if any complaint went to the council, she's the chair of the committee that investigates complaints. If Harrison did not name anyone, Dr. Chauhan, and follow your own logic through here, Dr. Chauhan. If Harrison did not name anyone, then Marks Woodvine, Councillor Woodvine, has a right to stand up and say point of personal clarification because she could have been inferring him. Every other councillor in that room has a right to stand up and say a point of personal clarification because of that. Do you see what happens when you lie? Do you think what happens when you twist things, manipulate things, make things up as you go along? You get caught out. And Dr. Chauhan was caught out. He's handled this meeting appallingly. He has handled this meeting appallingly. And I'll tell him that when I see him next.
Time. I'm asking you to sit down third time, please. I'm asking you to stay quiet. There's no point of personal explanation. You're not involved in this. There was a matter between the two members which is resolved. So please sit down. Scrap the two-child benefit cap. I call on Councillor Sykes to move.
Okay. So, Hoban, Hince, Hindle and Navesey voted with Labour. And as a consequence, if the online safety bill is strengthened even more, or if people in the streets of Oldham are picked up and arrested, know that 4 white councillors got in bed with their Pakistani mates. Arud Shah and Mushtaq, and 2-tier Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, who have clearly used what happened as a means of trying to censor and silence free speech across the country. Just out in Oldham, we want to go even further. If you're finding value in this transmission, if you're watching this later on perhaps and finding value in this transmission, please consider taking out a subscription to Redwall and The Rabble. A paid subscription is just from 75 pence a week. www.redwallandtherabble.co.uk, or if you can't do that, consider buying me a coffee. The links are embedded at the top of this chat and I'll put them in the description once the recording's finished. And also there is a Patreon page with a very active group chat. Consider joining that, patreon.com/ /recusant _ NINE9.com. The work I do is only possible with the support of ordinary people. I came back at the request of people, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not enjoying it one bit at all. Let's move on. This is the 2-child benefit cap. It's a motion by the Lib Dems, and Labour, of course, grandstanded like mad when they were in opposition, calling out the 2-child benefit cap, 2-child benefit cap, and how it entrenched families in poverty. Minister after minister, politician after politician lined up, and now they're in power. Same as with the winter fuel allowance. They want to kill off the pensioners, and they want to starve the children. The Lib Dems wanted to call out the hypocrisy, cheap political point scoring, but this is what's happened.
I need to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be as brief as I can be. We've had debates before on this in the council chamber when it was introduced a number of years back by the Conservative government. We've also had debates about child poverty on a number of occasions, and also it's not just the poverty, it's the impact that poverty has on the children in terms of their education and their life chances.
Some issues are so important, so pressing, so at the core of one's beliefs, that the seriousness of the risk demonstrates the seriousness of the issue at stake. The 2-child benefit cap was introduced in 2017 by George Osborne under the government of Theresa May. And that Conservative government paid for its tax cuts to corporations and the wealthy by targeting children, among others, for cuts in benefits and services. Now, why should the Labour members decide to vote for the motion rather than put through their amendment? You may notice I normally look up and give a speech based on what I'm just thinking. Those are not my words. That was the words of John McDonnell, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party, before he had voted against the government's plans to keep that cap in place. If your Labour members are saying that, you should think twice about voting for your amendment and about keeping this cap in place.
Here's the real issue. The real issue is that we've been left with a financial crisis which is really, really very difficult to manage. £22 billion. Now, Mr. Mayor, we've got to be responsible, because the problem is if you're not responsible in finance, you end up bankrupting the country. Now, we're not going to be doing that. That's completely irresponsible. And that's why we're making the amendments. I am saying that we will lobby to scrap this limit as soon as possible, but we've got to make sure that we can control and clear the mess the Tory government has left. And that's why we brought this amendment. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Motion to motor insurance premiums.
So there you go. Blaming the previous government, and of course the context is the Labour Party has not said anything about committing to changing this later. So Jabbar, unless he's suddenly escalated his position in the national government, is talking absolute nonsense. He's assuming. The Labour Party just exploit the poor. I think it's very, very clear. They exploit the working classes. They continue to exploit the working classes. And once they're getting power, as they have here, you can see they have no interest. Pigs in a trough is the term and also the image that comes to my mind when the power in this country swings from one to the other. They just want to benefit themselves, which I think is at Keir Starmer today. It was revealed he's received over £100,000 in gifts, including having his wife's dresses and his suits. Wow. Wow. We move on. We move on to the Oldham group. That's the sectarian, the Pakistani sectarians, led by the HMO horror show, that is Councillor what's his name? Forgotten his name. Cameron Goffor, and the man with a hidden history, former Labour, secret Labour. I hear he went and did a speech at the Trade Union Congress this week or last week, trying to get back in Labour. We show up, Akhtar. Now that you can't make, you can't get any more votes out of exploiting Gaza, are we now looking to try and get back in Labour? It wouldn't surprise me at all. Show back to now. What they're trying to do is put forward this motion calling the motor insurance industry racist, far right, claiming that people with names like Mohammed and I suppose Imran suffer higher car insurance in Oldham. The background, the context to all of this, of course, is Arooj Shah's car was blown up in Glodwick as well when she left it unlocked, and the police have yet to charge anyone. So no wonder car insurance premiums have gone up in Glodwick when the leader of the council's car is blown to smithereens. And the CCTV footage shows it's unlocked. Yet no one's arrested, no one's charged, no one's convicted. Ooh, I wonder why that was. So Shoaib Akhtar, former Labour, will have, of course, get up and play the race card. It's hilarious. And I'll deconstruct it afterwards, but I'll let it play out first.
Councillor Akhtar to move and Councillor Ibrahim to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to move a motion that addresses a deeply concerning issue within our community, a racial disparity in motor insurance.
So first off, sorry, I said I'd let it play out, but I can't help myself straight away. Within our community. What he means by our community is the Pakistani community. That's who the likes of Shoaib Akhtar are here representing. They're not representing the wider community. When the sectarian Oldham Group councillor stands up and talks about our community, let's be very, very clear as to who we mean by our community. And it isn't you or me.
Premiums. That is not only unjust, but also a glaring example of the systematic discrimination that persists in our society. Recent studies have unveiled a shocking truth. Residents in the most ethnically diverse areas of our country, including right here in Oldham, are being systematically charged higher motor insurance premiums. A 2023 Citizens Advice Bureau survey found that these residents face premiums that are on average 33% higher than those in less diverse areas. Let me be clear, this disparity is not due to higher crime rates, more accidents, or the value of the vehicles. It is due to the postcode lottery of where they live, and more insidiously, the racial and ethnic backgrounds of the people who live there. We have evidence that individuals with names like Muhammad are being quoted higher premiums than those with names like John, despite having identical risk profiles. This is blatant, unacceptable discrimination. We must hold the insurance companies accountable, demand transparency, and challenge these discriminatory practices. Let us send a clear message today. Discrimination has no place in our town, and we will not rest until every resident is treated with the fairness and respect they deserve. Mr. Mayor, we accept the amendment proposed by the Labour Group. Thank you.
It's a really important topic about inequalities and about the unfairness that our communities face when buying car insurance. Therefore, I would like this to be viewed as a friendly amendment.
I have sympathy with anyone who pays more motor insurance than they should do. However, Councillor Shah has mentioned certain things which I want to mention. You've actually presented this, but with no actual evidence. I think we need a bit more meat on this and with actual figures. And I found it quite strange that people should pick names out. Now, if you can pick names out and give them increased premiums, well, where is the evidence and how many? Is it just in your ward or is it in other wards? But I'm afraid I couldn't vote for this because I don't have the actual evidence before me that says this has happened.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, because I've clearly stated that it's the 2023 Citizen Advice Survey that actually found those disparity in terms of the insurance. That's where the actual research has come from. And it's quite clear in that names are being mentioned, that the name Muhammad, when you put that name in, it actually sort of increases the insurance premiums.
Putting Oldham Council back in the black.
So that amendment, the Labour Party friendly amendment, so these are the Pakistanis supporting the Pakistanis. As you could clearly see there, Shoaib Akhtar being supported by his former bum chum Arud Shah. And I want to unpack this. Pam Burm says there's no evidence, but Akhtar is claiming there is evidence, and he keeps making reference. He makes reference to a 2023 Citizens Advice Bureau survey. A survey does not evidence anything. A survey asks people questions on their beliefs, on their experiences. A survey does not drill down to check the evidence. That's not what surveys do. Surveys are about perception. So Akhtar is playing the race card, aided by Arud Shah. And clearly, Councillor Akhtar stated, we have evidence. Ideal risk factors, people with names like Mohammed and names like John. Well, where's the evidence? Publish the evidence. Because if you have this evidence, you've got to go to the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And they have the statutory power to do something about this. But the likes of Akhtar and Cameron Gaffer and their chicken shop mates have no idea how this works. This is just grandstanding nonsense. The council has no power over insurance companies, and that's if it was true. And like Pam Burn, I do not believe it is true. What I do believe, and what I have experienced myself, is that the postcode lottery is true, but it isn't a lottery. It's based upon claims, it's based upon higher levels of crime, and whether you like it or not, Glodick is a epicenter. Areas like Glodick, areas like Werneth, parts of Coldest are epicenters of dodgy drug dealing, inappropriate car driving, with young men driving overpowered cars. Some poor lad died on Frederick Street, wasn't it, last year? Tipped the car over. I saw the video footage online. There was that poor girl killed by those Bangladeshi lads near the hospital on Rochdale Road a couple of years ago. That is what is driving up your car insurance. Arud Shah's car being blown up in Glodick is what's driving up your car insurance. If your car insurance is high because you're an ethnic minority person living in those areas, it's because not of racism, but because of the actions of the immediate community in which you live. My advice to Pakistani parents is stop buying or allowing your children to have overpowered cars. Give them a nice Nissan Leaf or whatever the equivalent is these days. My advice is to lock your cars at night. Isn't that right, Arud Shah? And if I was to take it to an uncomfortable place, my advice would be don't scam the insurance. Don't have cars blown up. What did I read in Glodick a few years ago? Was there not a car crime in Glodick, and it was reported that something like £50,000 worth of gold had been left in the car? I might have the amount wrong, but I remember. car in Glodick being targeted, and he had an amount of gold in there that made me just chuckle. Someone should write to, because they passed this motion now and this amendment from the Labour Party. So it's a Labour Party amendment that was passed. Someone should write to the Borough Solicitor asking for the evidence on which this motion was passed and asking for sight of the evidence of we have evidence Mohammed and John names. Shoaib Akhtar. Because if they can't provide the evidence, what's happened in this council meeting? It's misconduct in public office. It's a dodgy dossier. They've lied to get a motion through, so prove it. Where's the evidence? I'm with Pam Byrne. Where's the evidence? There's no evidence in the motion. I've checked the paperwork. There's no evidence in the motion. There's no links like you'd see in an academic piece. Or one of my articles with a link that takes you somewhere. No, there's nothing like that. They're playing the race card and they're trying to outdo each other. Each cartel faction is trying to outdo each other as more pro-ethnic minority than the other, more Muslim than the other, more pro-Palestine than the other. And it will not take us to a good place. But yet again, Hinds and Hoban voted with this. Hinds and Hoban believe, Hinds, Hoban, Hindle and Navesey believe that Mohammeds are being charged more than Johns for the car insurance simply because they're called Mohammed. That's right, isn't it, Councillor Brian Hoban? Now, I'd suggest that a drink driving conviction would impact your car insurance irrespective if your name was Mohammed or John. Wouldn't you agree? Yet Councillor Mark Ince and Councillor Brian Hoban are peddling this victim narrative that is prevalent within Oldham's Pakistani community.
Call on Councillor Quick to move and Councillor Woodvine to second the motion.
Press briefings that have occurred before these meetings that Oldham Council is in some difficulties with the figures. To get, as I said, in the budget only in February, to have condescending messages from the Finance Chief, the Leader of the Council and others as to what is actually going on should worry anybody in this borough as to why the state of the council finances have certainly worsened since the budget. In fact, if anything, what was presented in the budget wasn't necessarily worth the paper it was printed on. So what we're asking for is basically to get to why we are now in this state. And that's why obviously our motion essentially calls for a forensic accountant to come in and check what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and where we can do going forward better.
To Woodvine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my favourite things happened to me recently. I was proven right. When I proposed the Conservatives' opposition budget in March of this year, I showed significant foresight when I said this administration's long-term strategy has always been unsustainable and has been obvious from the start. To wait until there is another Labour government to bail them out.
Councillor Jabbar, you want
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know where to start with this. I just don't understand, right, the point of bringing this motion to the council. Obviously, both of them don't understand local government finance. So don't come here and scaremonger people. We have got a real financial issue. We're dealing with it, and we'll get to the bottom of it. And I can guarantee you this council will not be bankrupt. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Famous last words, Councillor Jabbar. Never say you don't know. Never predict the future when it comes to money, because I'll tell you now, a lot of fortunes have been lost. Certainly when that comes around, because that was the same tactic that Birmingham used until it went bump. Nottingham used and it went bump. So I think the people of this borough have a right to be sceptical of Councillor Jabbar's famous last words. It does seem to be you're running rather scared as to why you don't want us to try and enhance the financial security of this borough. Rather strange indeed, because anyone with a clear conscience would just say, well, okay, we'll open them up, have them checked, and on your way, if there's nothing to find, then there's nothing to find. If there is, well, let's find out and let's deal with it. It's as straightforward as that. Given that the council's budget shortfall has nearly gone from 20-odd million to nearly 30-odd million, I don't think our group will take any lectures on things going forward when such a shortfall of that magnitude comes forward to the people of this borough, because ultimately it is the people of this borough who will pay the price for the mistakes of this administration. And there are many projects that have failed. Hotel Future never happened. Now we're getting a hotel high-rise, like Nakatomi Tower next.
Out of time.
But thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, on that point, given the time frames we've got left. Thank you.
I will try. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will try my best to get this in 5 minutes, I promise.
Okay, we'll get on to Councillor Hurley in a moment. So, the Conservative motion was to bring in the forensic accountants to examine the council's books. Nothing more than that. And it was as a consequence of the budget being set in February, how the council's overspend has spiralled way out of control, which leads people to the conclusion of either the council has lost all control of its finances, or they lied and misled when they set the budget. Unbelievably, Councillor Abdul Jabbar stands up and says he doesn't understand the point of bringing this motion. Well, when your own council has admitted, and he admits in the following line, to the scale of the challenge they face, and in the previous part of this meeting was forced to admit that they haven't got enforcement officers because they can't replace existing staff that leave because of the gravity of the situation they find themselves in. I think it's very clear what the point of this motion is how can we stop it from getting any worse? Why won't you bring the forensic accountants in, Jabbar? What will they find? More postal vote hotspots that have been secretly funded by the council? More land sold at mates' rates? Staggeringly, Councillor Brian Hoban from Failsworth and Neil Hindle, elected on a mandate to challenge this very thing of council mismanagement of finances, voted to prevent forensic auditors from coming in and inspecting Oldham Council's books. That's the Failsworth Independent Party voted against forensic accountants coming in to investigate the books of the council. How does that make you feel, Failsworth? Likewise, Councillor Mark Mintz and Lisa Navesey also voted against, blocked forensic accountants from coming in and inspecting Oldham Council's books. Why would Councillor Mark Mintz from Shaw, people of Shaw, do you think you've had a fair deal from Oldham Council? Do you think you overpay and get less back in return? All of my friends in Shaw and Crompton believe that. So why are the people you voted in, Councillor Mark Ince and Lisa Navesey, blocking forensic accountants coming in and investigating the books of Oldham Council? Why are Hints and Navesey blocking accountants from coming in to see if there's been any financial mismanagement in the council? Answers on a hip flask, perhaps? We move on to Maggie Hurley does a maiden speech. It's actually, good speech. And Councillor Hughes, who follows it up and actually stands up and seconds the motion properly. Not like Niece and Azy, I stand to second the motion. I'll go back to chewing my gum. Actually, to give him a due, Maggie's motion is good, it's valid. It's on something that never should have happened. And they get it through. So well done to them. No, genuine, from me, well done to them. It's a valid point. They campaigned on it properly, and well done to them.
As women moved from home births into hospitals in the 1950s, somehow a new practice started. Deaths of stillborn and newborn babies.
As a mother, to hear the devastating news over the past few weeks, it is truly heartbreaking to hear about families who never knew where their loved ones were. I am urging all members in this chamber to do the honourable thing by the grieving relatives and vote in favour of this motion.
Motion carried. Thank you very much again. We have a last motion and...
Okay, so everyone voted in favour of that, and well done to me. Should never have come to that. The last motion, of course, is Councillor Mark Hints wanting an investigation into collective spirit through school. That's how I was involved in. Councillor Mark Hints has been, of course, been in the council chamber now for over a year. Never brought this motion. In fact, one of the reasons why Councillor Mark Hints is in the council chamber is because I helped get him elected. At no point during that period did he say any of this sort of stuff. Now, what's gone on is, since I've been rightfully bringing to public attention some of his shortcomings, his failings, the way he's got in bed with Labour, he's tried to harass and intimidate friends of mine. That we have phone recordings and it's been passed on to the police. Then he's been harassing and intimidating other councillors, trying to blackmail me, threaten me, that if I don't shut up, this will happen. And now he brings this motion. Now I want you to listen to the motion. It's absolutely scandalous and outrageous, and I will issue my statement immediately afterwards.
We are already out of the time, so you have 5 minutes. Is collective spirit...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Quickly, Mr Mayor, briefly. Given that at the last meeting that the member who's about to propose this motion proposed it in the administration business, I'm confused as to why this is in opposition business, and I still haven't got clarity as to what the position is with the member who's about to speak.
I've been advising you to ask your own group leader because it was discussed that they have 5 minutes to present the motion. So,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to move this motion and will be asking for a recorded vote. This chamber has a proud tradition of working in the interests of vulnerable children. The horrific subjects of CSE being a case in point. Now that we have instigated a full independent CSE inquiry with the support of everyone in this chamber, other people are coming forward with accounts relating to other issues of child neglect and abuse. I have been contacted by over 80 individuals regarding the failure and closure of the collective free spirit school in 2017. These include former students, parents and other stakeholders who have given their accounts to this monstrous failure. These people still await answers and, more importantly, accountability.
Therefore, I ask members support this motion. Once again, I ask this chamber to demonstrate its commitment to the vulnerable and support. So I'd ask everyone to get behind this motion. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nifty.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank my colleague, Councillor Ince, for being here after he was hospitalised yesterday evening. But back to why I've raised. No child should suffer any type of neglect, especially in a school where children from a very early age should thrive. So therefore, I second this motion.
So 46 for, 13 abstentions is carried. Right, we move on to the next item.
Okay, first of all, in what capacity was Councillor Hinz speaking? You noticed it wasn't addressed whether he was speaking as part of the Labour administration or as part of an opposition. It was a simple question. And again, Councillor Chauhan dodged it and tried to say he's got to ask his group leader. No, he has a right to ask in that meeting, as does anyone else, in what capacity is Councillor Hinz standing up? Is it as a member of the the independent group? Is it as a member of the Shaw and Crompton Independent, fake party, Secret Squirrel Society? In what capacity is he standing up as a Nazi? And he's changed his allegiance to the Nazi party or the Nazi Allegiance Party. In what capacity is he standing? They won't say. He then goes on to say that the council has a proud tradition of working on child safety. Do any of you believe that this council has a proud tradition? How many times did they vote down a public inquiry? And of course, at the last meeting, Hinz also voted down calls for a genuine public inquiry. He then references child neglect and abuse and seems to infer that the school was involved. This is in 2017, child neglect and abuse, and 80 parents and children have come forward. It's a complete and utter lie. It's a complete and utter lie. And not only is it a complete and utter lie, if that was the case, Hinz has a statutory duty as a corporate parent to hand that file over to the police or to the designated safeguarding officer in Oldham Council, who then has a statutory duty. Hinz is a liar. And I look forward to an investigation, and I have responded already. I've issued a statement to the national press who've contacted me that I believe this to be a personal vendetta instigated by a red-nosed Nazi, Sieg Heiling, politician. And it's a continuation to harass and intimidate me. And more so, I welcome a full public inquiry. Let's bring it on. I'm not hiding. Bring on the public inquiry. I welcome a full public inquiry. And if you don't get a full public inquiry from the government, Hinz, I challenge that Pakistani leader, Arud Shah, and her sidekick, Nazi uniform wearing Mark Mince, to commission a Telford-style judge-led inquiry. Because if there have been 80 children who have been abused and neglected in any way linked to anything that I have done, then I'll march myself to prison. I'll march myself to prison. It is an outright lie by the gangster-affiliated Arud Shah and her new sidekicks, Brian, the convicted fraudster Hobin, and his business partner Hindle from the Failsworth Independent Party, who just earlier voted to block a forensic accountant coming in to scrutinise Oldham Council's books where billions have been blown. And the red-nosed Nazi uniform-wearing idiot, Councillor Mark Mince, and the killer in the family, Lisa Navesey, who is yet to condemn her nephew for killing someone. Bring it on. I challenge you to launch a Telford-style inquiry. But more so, The borough solicitor and the chief executive are now involved in misconduct in public office if they are not taking off Councillor Mark Ince that dossier, that folder of 80 victims of neglect or abuse. The only thing he's got in that folder is his hip flask and maybe some white sugar. Pillock. Think I'm scared of any of you? Am I? Fuck. Bring it on. Bring it on. Because the reality is the people of this town know who the criminals are. The people of this town know who the cartels are. The people of this town know who Arud Shah, who Brian Hoban, and who Mark Hinton and Lisa Navesey are. And the people of this town, more than that, know who I am, what sort of man I am, and what I stand for. I hope you enjoyed that analysis, and I hope you can see how I am. Forthright, fearless, bring it on. If you take value in these transmissions, please consider buying me a coffee, at the very least. Thousands watch this. And I'm looking at my light, wondering if I can afford to pay my electric bill next month. So if you find value in these transmissions, please buy me a coffee. Better still, subscribe to Redwall and the Rabble. 75 pence to you means 75 pence to you means nothing to you, but it means everything to me. And if you can afford to do so, please subscribe at the Recusant tier at £25 a month. I know it seems like a lot, but it isn't. For those of you who can afford it, you spend more on a newspaper a day. I will see people again on Sunday night for the next Recusant live transmission. And in the meantime, this is your council. Welcome to Oldham.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.